Welcome to this intuitive chat. It's been a while since we've had a chat. I want to do a chat on that trauma survivors are very good in a crisis situation and exploring that and seeing if it's actually a good quality to have. And if this is your first time to the channel, I'm Dion. I run Evolution Support Services. I'm a certified level 2 EFT tapping practitioner. I'm also an NDIS support worker. I've worked over 14 years in mental health and also disability support. And I also have a lived experience of CPTSD. So some of these chats are from what I've learned on my journeys or what I've experienced. And this will be a combination of both. I myself, like being in support work for that long, I've had to deal with crisis situations and situations that are very uncomfortable for most people to go through. It's something that probably I can't say that within every situation that I'll probably be the person that is a little bit more familiar or be able to deal with these situations a little bit more level-headedly, or to start to switch on a little bit more quicker than most. But I can't actually say that as a really good thing, or also that that will be the case in all situations. There's some situations where I just don't know what to do because I literally don't know what to do. And I think everything that I say from now, just take as information to also reflect it back by your treating team, and also not to take my word as authority as far as like what you should do in your life. I think it's also good to be able to take information and also see if it relates to your own experiences, because we can be very empathetic to most things. It's part of about how we learn as we develop with our mirror neurons, but it's also whether that's actually true to your own experiences, or whether what I say will actually be helpful to your healing of those experiences, or even reviewing your current healing modalities and seeing if they are actually even aware of your symptoms, and actually how to start to maybe include other healing modalities or swap out healing modalities that might be a little bit more beneficial towards your well-being, because that's what we're aiming for, not the benefit of the healing practitioner, but your own benefit. To the question of, is it actually good to be good in a crisis situation? Yes and no. Is it actually good long term? Is it good short term? And who's it good for? Definitely for the person. If you've got a level-headed person, say with paramedics and all that, they have to deal with quite traumatic situations day in, day out. That if you've got someone that knows what they're doing, that it's actually good to have that person there, because it's like you're now dealing with a person that's not going to be like having their cognitive mind switch off because there's an overwhelm of stress. The starting to think rationally of how to help yourself, sort of thing. So it's kind of good for the person that's had the crisis situation to help you get through whatever has afflicted you. For the actual person that's dealing with the situation, they're probably dealing with it and be definitely affecting them, but they're still able to cause action and effect by getting the person help. And others around it might go, oh wow, you're really good in that situation, and it might be some form of weird validation that you're really good at dealing with a traumatic situation. And you've also got to ask yourself, what is trauma? Well, trauma is, the Latin root of the word is wounding or wound. So you sustain a wound. You can sustain a physical wound and an emotional wound. And some of these emotional wounds we can't see. So we have a lot of people who perceivingly on the outside look quite nice and healthy, and maybe they even think that themselves. But there is a lot of stuff that when something does trigger, there is that explosiveness underneath that starts to actually get triggered. And that explosiveness is the actual symptoms that start to arise somatically. So we can have a dysregulated nervous system. As any good EFT practitioner will know, as EFT tapping is a stress reduction tool, we have our sympathetic and parasympathetic state. Sympathetic state is kind of like our action state, and our rest and digest state is our parasympathetic state. And we don't always want to be in a rest and digest state, and sometimes we don't always want to be in a sympathetic state. We kind of want to find a nice balance, because we don't want one or the other. And sometimes we can be too apathetic, so we need a bit of sympathetic, or we can be a little bit too hypervigilant and need a little bit more regulating, a little bit more soothing, and going into that parasympathetic state. And why I bring up hyperarousal and hypervigilance is kind of the cause of why a person might be so good in a crisis situation, because how we sustained our trauma, our wounds, is not from nice, peaceful, happy surroundings. It wasn't all high vibing. It wasn't abundant in caring people. It wasn't all these sorts of things have grown up where we might have had healthy role models. We know how to deal with situations in a nice, emotionally mature way. We didn't tend to have that to sustain like things like childhood trauma or CPTSD or these sorts of things, or even PTSD. We had a crisis situation that was occurring, and with CPTSD, it's an ongoing, the big T traumas, the big events, so like your car crashes, that would be a big T trauma, it's a one-time event. And then we have our little T traumas, our little traumas that happen over the way, and we might have had emotional neglect, we might have had emotional abuse, we might have had physical abuse, abandonment issues, all these sorts of things where not only does it affect us emotionally and mentally, but it also affects our nervous system. Our nervous system becomes dysregulated. And also, when you think about a crisis and someone being good in that, it might be because they're quite familiar with crisis situations. They may have grown up in crisis situations where their environment, their caring environment, wasn't too caring, and it was quite a explosive environment. It was quite a disruptive environment, and how they function, what may have been of service to people to help tend to their needs, very much like an ambulance driver would turn up to a situation and start to apply counseling to someone that can't emotionally regulate themselves. So you become quite good in your role of becoming of service to people, of being in a crisis situation as you grow up with that as your role model. With that, your nervous system becomes hyper aroused. It's quite aware of, of being dysregulated. And it also moves into hypervigilance. So it's always on guard. It's always panning for that next crisis situation to deal with and to manage. And in doing that, if you are constantly tending to other people's needs, you're also kind of like in a war situation, going out there and being the person that defuses the landmine. So you know somewhat that your environment is safe and you're not walking on eggshells and having that explode in your face. You're not having people's emotional eruptions constantly happen. So you start to perceive and start to be on the lookout for perceived dangers, and how can I manage that so at least I can stay safe. So we have our hyperaroused system, our hypervigilance system, which is a dysregulated system. It's not a calm nervous system. And not that we want it to always be calm, but we don't want it to be in extremes where it's starting to get always triggered by just small things, or even things that it's perceiving is on the horizon of threat. Like, oh, there's that bill coming, sort of thing. And it's like everything in my past has told me that I'm such a failure because I can't budget or I can't do all these things. And all of a sudden I'm starting to lose sleep and I'm starting to get irritable, or I can't eat, or I can't function in life, or I start to get physical pain in my body, and I might go to the doctors and they can't find things because they're not looking at the trauma or the stress. They're looking at what they can prescribe as a medication to actually start to almost suppress this in a way. So there might be that situation where we've dealt with a crisis situation, handled it well, and we've done our duty in a way of tending to everyone else's and keeping everything safe. Everyone said, "Oh, you've done so well," but you start not to feel well, perhaps a few days later, or a week later, or a couple of weeks later, or even a month later. And it's hard to tell with timelines with this sort of stuff. It happens for me very much like this. I like to associate it to like in the movies where you see with the war movies, and there's that hand grenade that goes off, but it doesn't blow everyone up. It's just concussed people, and it's like they're sort of like walking around in a daze, and then there's that ringing as it rings you back into your senses and then back into reality, and then they have to keep on acting in quite a crisis situation. There's kind of that shell shock state of dealing with a crisis situation and dealing with a situation where no one was safe, including the person that was trying to bring about safety, the person that was trying to help the crisis situation. And that's because even though it might be normal, quote unquote normal, for a person that's grown up in that, it doesn't mean that they're immune to the stress or immune to the visceral elements of dealing with someone that's either yelling at them or screaming at them, or someone that's collapsed on the ground and is having a seizure, or all these sorts of things. They're not immune to that. No one is. What happens is when because we think it's normal, we might not actually attend to our own needs of that dysregulating thing that's happened to us. So we're in that shell shock state. We're just like, well, it's just a Monday sort of thing. So we're dealing with that, and maybe a week's time, that bringing back to our senses as our senses start to align, or even try to send those signals to our brain to pay attention that we've got needs that we need to attend to. It might start to somatically express itself or arise somatically, because trauma is stored in the body, so it's going to naturally arise. And that might start to show up in irritability. It might start to show up in loss of appetite. You might start to withdraw from people. You might loss of sleep or disturbed sleep. Whole range of things. Even in my first aid course, is they teach us of these post-traumatic stress symptoms that are starting to arise. And also because we're not immune to it, it's also going to affect our autoimmune system. So we might start to have, say, like skin conditions. This is another thing that happens for me if I'm under extreme stress. Like in the past, I've had situations where I get very itchy. Itchy. It's like I'm scratching my arms, and there were situations even in my past work environments where I've had to, like, where police have been involved, and it's like mental health and all that, and I've had to stop people from self-harming. Situations that were very traumatic to even witness, and I was very itchy. I was itchy, and I'd be developing these sores, and it's kind of like, it kind of feels like a cross between a very extreme mosquito bite and also having like little razor blades cutting into your skin, and you're scratching at it. And I'd have to keep my nails like very cut, because it's like the more that I scratch, the more that I bleed and all these sorts of things. Other things was I was getting a lot of tension in my body. Like I was just like basically almost rigor mortis in a way. It's like and struggling to breathe, these somatic symptoms. And of course, a GP who is not trained in trauma is not going to be looking for these symptoms. They're going to be looking at what they can apply topically. So they might give you a steroid cream, for example. What's in steroid creams? Well, there's some creams called cortisone creams. Cortisone, cortisol. It's a stress hormone. And you're also dealing with a dysregulated nervous system, which is a system that's also going to cause inflammation, going to cause sensitivities within your body. It might arise in skin conditions or rosacea. They'll give you a steroid cream. So you're basically treating cortisol with cortisol, a stress hormone with a stress hormone. You're applying that topically to something that is a little bit more beneath the surface and is a little bit more dysregulated than actually something that is arising topically. Loss of appetite, or maybe when you eat, you just feel like you want to vomit because like your stomach is still in that fight and flight stage. It's still wanting to escape the danger. Pain, back pain, because our psoas muscle, our fight, flight, freeze muscle, it wants to activate to get away, but we're having to keep it together basically. And it's a keeping together of something that wants to fall apart. And it's also something that is sending us signals. There's this alarm bell ringing that's saying that we need to actually address our senses, because we had to perceive a lot of things that overwhelmed our senses and put us in a dysregulated state. So ways that you might want to start to look at addressing that dysregulation that might be arising somatically and creating that safety within by starting to regulate the nervous system. You want to start to turn off those fire bells and start to address that nervous system. How can you do that? Well, I didn't become an EFT practitioner because I like touching my face. I became an EFT practitioner because it's a stress reduction tool. That's why I became an EFT practitioner, or someone that has CPTSD as their lived experience, because it regulates your nervous system. It starts to turn off or start to get that yawning when it happens and you feel heavily meditated, these sorts of things. You're starting to calm and soothe that nervous system. You might still also be addressing cognitively what's happening for you or what happened to you, but you're also releasing at the same time. So you're not just getting overwhelmed cognitively, because when we talk about something, we can also start to shut off our cognition because we get flooded by all these past experiences that are alive and well in the body, because we want to have something that's happened to us and start to move towards a resolution by resolving the issue that's within that nervous system. And when we feel safer in something, we're probably more likely to perceive something in a more rational sense. We're not going to look back at these things in a very judgmental way or a criticizing way. We're going to start to do it with a more level head because we feel more leveled out within ourselves. But if we're within therapies that aren't aware of this, or aren't sharing this information, or aren't actively doing this, we might have individual therapies. Once again, if a GP is not going to be aware of the trauma sort of thing, it might be looking at including people that are aware of these things and can start to actually somatically address these stored traumas that are in the body, because we need to, it's more, I don't want to say energy in the woo-woo sense. I want to say it's this energy that's wanting us to escape from a situation or to speak up for ourselves. That's why it's like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk will talk about play therapies and expressive therapies to actually express what is suppressed within our nervous system, to start to release what is being kept in. And similar to a doctor, if you've sustained a wound, a cut, they need you to let go a little bit so that they can get in there and start to tend to the wound. Same as with trauma. Once again, the Latin root is wounding. They need to be able to get in there. You need to be able to let go a little bit so that we can start to release these things. But what stops that is that trust issue, because we don't want to be hurt again. So that vulnerability is something that might lead us into therapies, and it's also something that might even lead us into group therapies. Group therapies are very good. I'm not going to say anything negative about group therapies. I would just say there's an awareness that probably our individualized trauma probably needs individualized care, which might be hard to get within a group setting, because even on an individual basis, there are some things that we've done that we had to do to survive that we might be deeply ashamed of, that we don't even want to admit to ourselves, let alone to another person. And there's also the group dynamic of there's always going to be that one chatty person, there's always going to be that person that wants to hold the floor a little bit more. It's going to be the actual group instructor themselves, what's in it for them sort of thing. And it's also, especially if you're on a Zoom sort of thing, you can blend in a group and you don't actually have to be speaking too much about your experiences, or you might get your turn. It's looking at, similar with self-care, there are some things that we might not be aware of that until someone actually brings that awareness to us, that we can actually start to address that within ourselves and start to make growth. And that can be impeded or slowed down by sometimes having to once again attend to our own wounds with self-care. And self-care is an addition to your primary care, your primary source of how you're actually dealing with something, because it takes effort and work to actually get better. It's not something that we can do in our own leisurely time and log on and do when we feel is right, and also do the things that we don't feel is right for us, which might actually be the things that we need to deal with, because it's an avoidance to actually wanting to go, oh, I'm not an angry person, so I won't deal with that thing. When that might be the actual thing that's actually starts to stir whenever we feel threatened and we want to fight back, our self-defense. So it's kind of like some things that we actually can see quite clearly for others, but we can't see within ourselves. If we're constantly talking about our emotions, but we're seeming to be making no progress, it's probably because emotions aren't really cognitive driven. They're emotion driven or feeling driven. So it's knowing that sometimes talking about things does have its benefit, but it's also we need to combine the body in it. Your brain is attached to a body, and your body is also attached to your brain, and there's more signals being sent from your body to your brain than your brain to the body. So it's something that you can't outthink trauma. You need to actually release the trauma to actually help your thinking become a little bit more regulated as well. Your brain is a muscle, so you need to also train your brain post that regulation of your nervous system to learn new behaviors, to learn new role modelings for yourself. So it's not going to be a one size fits all. It's not going to be a hacking of your nervous system thing. It's like, hack a man getting in there. And it's like anything that's hacking, it's normally a negative. It's like, oh, someone's hacked my computer. That's great. It's like I'm healed now. It doesn't literally make sense. It's a retraining of your nervous system. The similar with the, and I'll probably end this here. It's a similar with when you go into the army and you do your basic training, you have a drill sergeant, and people see drill sergeants as that person that yells at you. Yes, they do yell at you. I can attest to that. But they're not just there as their cathartic release of exploding into rage all the time. They're simulating a stressful environment. When you go into a war situation, the so-called enemy is not going to be too caring about your feelings because they're trying to kill you at that stage. You're in their way. So the drill sergeant is running you through drills, getting you somewhat conditioned or familiar to a stressful environment, so that when that stressful environment happens, those explosions and all that, the hand grenades are going off, you can do your duty of fulfilling your role as a soldier. But wars come to an end, your service comes to an end, your childhood experiences of having to survive within quite a chaotic environment comes to an end only by addressing and resolving those issues that affected you. Someone saying you're healed or someone saying you're discharged doesn't mean that your nervous system is discharged. You need to be actually able to address that nervous system to discharge it and then actually make sense of what happened to you. And sometimes by doing that means that it's another cycle of discharging, because once we realize what's happened to us, there can be a new wave of emotion. So it's kind of like a grief cycle as well. Processing, going through that process. It's going to be a long-term process. Being in crisis situations and being able to handle that and having been aware of the somatic experiences that arise from that is not going to be a positive thing long term. It's like you want to be able to deal with the crisis situation, know that it's over, so you can return to an equilibrium or return to some type of healthy life, and know that that was then, but knowing that it's not alive and well within you now because you've started to address that. So yeah, it's to look at, and also to look at your therapies of, is it just, it's good to be part of a group. And if you're vulnerable and isolated sort of thing, then any sort of group situation is going to be feeling like you're a part of something. And also looking at your individual therapies of like, it seems to be like 20 years down the track and we're still just talking about things. Can we enact change within the body? Looking at these things, because at the end of the day, you want quality of health and you want well-being, and it's not for the benefit of the health practitioner. It should be for your benefit for yourself, where you're not benefiting their pocket, but you're benefiting your well-being. You want to invest in your own health, well-being long term. So it's looking at the effective treatments that will be effective for yourself, and also the treatments that are going to start to lean into that discomfort and sort of say, this is probably not a, a, a nice, healthy way of living, but if we can attend to that wound, you might get back to full functionality. So I'm Dion from Emotion Support Services. I offer EFT tapping one-on-one online. I'm also an NDIS support worker, so if you're in the Brisbane area and need support, I am currently at capacity, but that doesn't mean in the future that there will be availability. If you're on the Mable platform, I'm also on the Mable platform. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one, and bye for now.